It has been a full year of cooking here on YouTube and over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. So what I want to do today is share with you my family's favorite recipes this year. All of these recipes are available over on my blog. I have links to them in the description box, and there are timestamps for all of them, so use them if you need them. And before we get going, don't forget to sign up for the email list, because when you do, I will send you all of my recipes, videos, tutorials, and more directly to your inbox. So let's get going and check out my family's favorite meals. For dinner, I am making some roasted vegetables with compound butter from my garden. That is unsalted butter with garlic chives and a little bit of salt. Those garlic chives are from last year's herb garden, and herb gardens are a great way to garden in the suburbs because they don't take much space. They are really easy to preserve in butter or freeze, so it's a great way to get started. So I simply just chopped everything up. I melted the butter and I'm pouring it over, and I'm putting everything on a preheated stone. When I roast vegetables, I like to get the baking sheet, or in this case, the stone, nice and hot before I put the vegetables on, because that helps crisp them up, and they're really good that way. And then about halfway through, 10 minutes or so, I'm taking them out and giving them a stir and putting them back in the oven so they cook evenly. I shared a chicken sheet pan meal in a video recently. I'll leave that in the description box below, but it was delicious, and it's really similar to this, but instead of making this a sheet pan meal, I am making this with homemade sloppy joes on homemade sourdough buns. I feel like often when we're talking about scratch cooking, things seem complicated because there's a lot of talk about, say, sourdough and stretch and folds, for example. And I do like to experiment with technique in those things, but when it comes to actual cooking, like dinner, I want things to be really easy, because if it's not easy, I can't do all the other things that I want to do, like make sourdough and be in the garden. And these homemade sloppy joes, they take between 15 and 20 minutes to get on the table. Of course, the homemade sourdough buns took more time, but I actually made those a few days before, so these were leftovers. So you could use any leftover buns that you have, or store-bought if that's what you have too. So in my cast iron skillet, I just sauteed some onion, and now I'm adding in ground beef and giving it a stir. Of course, adding a little salt and pepper along the way to season it. And then just before I start adding in the saucy ingredients, I am mincing some garlic right into the pan. I say this all the time, don't overcook your garlic, it'll make it terrible. Now, the sloppy joe sauce is so easy. It is 1 cup of ketchup, and then add in some water. When I was looking at recipes for sloppy joes and recipe testing this, I kept seeing people adding in water, and it seemed redundant because I already had these saucy ingredients like yellow mustard that I'm adding in now, and of course the ketchup. But actually the water really helps not only combine the ingredients, but it gives it that classic sloppy joe texture. So then I'm also adding in a spoonful of brown sugar, a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, which I think I said incorrectly, but you know what I mean, and then a little bit of chili powder too. And then I'm simply stirring this up and letting it cook until the sauce reaches the desired consistency. You can get this full recipe with precise measurements in the description box below and on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. But let's talk about these sourdough hamburger buns. So I have been experimenting a lot with tongjiang, or what is also known as Japanese milk bread, and I have been recipe testing and working on milk bread hamburger buns. I have some kinks to work out with these, so the recipe will be available soon, but these were still very good. But at this point, they were a couple days old, and I wanted them to be softer and taste a little bit more fresh for the sloppy joes. So I sliced these in half, and then I steamed them. I don't have a basket steamer, so I just put an inch or two of water in a stock pot, and then I put my sieve over that. And then I put the buns right into the sieve with a lid and let them steam for a few minutes. And surprisingly, they took a little longer to steam than what I was anticipating. I thought it would happen a lot faster, but they did sit in there for a couple of minutes. But this was really good. So if you have a little bit of stale sourdough bread or some store-bought bread that just needs a little refresh, this was a great method. You could totally wrap it in a wet paper towel and put it in the microwave, but this was a lot better. Then I just spooned some of the sloppy joe mixture right onto the sourdough bun and topped it and served it with a side of those delicious roasted vegetables. And this was such an easy meal, scratch made from head to toe without any real extra work. Again, those buns, they were from a few days ago, so I didn't have to worry about it. And the sloppy joes, depending on how long it takes your beef to cook, they'll be ready in 15 to 20 minutes. So this was a great scratch made meal. For dinner, we are having a homemade pasta made on a gnocchi board and cream sauce. And here I am back with my grain mill again, and this time I am milling some hard red winter wheat. For pasta, you would probably want to use seminola or durum flour, but I don't have any. I'm having a hard time sourcing some of these grains because Azure Standard, who has the best prices, doesn't deliver here. So right now I'm just kind of using what I have. But in any case, I am mixing together the flour with some warm water and olive oil, and then I am kneading it on a floured surface. Now, I will say I had to add a bit of all-purpose flour to this just to make it less sticky. Not sure where I went wrong there, but by adding the all-purpose flour, it ended up being a perfect pasta dough. So once I kneaded it for about 8 to 10 minutes or so, I am wrapping it up in plastic and setting it aside for about 30 minutes to an hour. Really, the longer the better, about up to 3 hours. About a month ago, I took a pasta making class and we made pasta using a gnocchi board, which was game changer. It makes pasta so easy. You don't need a KitchenAid stand mixer. You don't need any fancy equipment. You just need a gnocchi board. And I got this really beautiful gnocchi board from a friend and my husband's coworker who makes custom woodworks. So all you do is roll the dough out, cut it into small pieces, and then run it across the gnocchi board, and it leaves these beautiful designs in it, but those designs also hold the sauce. So not only does it have an aesthetic quality about it, it also has a functional one. For the sauce, I am using homemade herb butter that I made with herbs from my garden earlier in the spring. I actually have a link for that also on my blog. I will leave that in the description box below. But this is a really easy way to add some flavor and fresh herbs into your food. And then of course, I'm adding in some pre-chopped onions and letting that saute. Then I'm also putting the pasta into a pot of boiling water. And while that cooks, I am deglazing the pan with some white wine. And then I'm also adding in some garlic powder. You could use fresh garlic. I was just feeling a little lazy at this time of day. And then some heavy cream. Fresh pasta does not take long to cook. So once the noodles start to float, I just test a couple and make sure they are done. These were al dente, which is how I wanted it, because then I move them into the sauce and let them finish cooking that way. And as some of the water goes into the sauce, don't worry about it. That actually helps thicken it up and makes it really delicious. Many of these recipes are available on my blog over at moonandmagnolia.com, but the best way to get all of my new I think for a lot of people across the board, homemaker, not a homemaker, mom, not a mom, one of the biggest sources of overwhelm is meals, because we have to do it 3 times a day, every single day of our lives. So one of the things I'm doing on my site to help myself and hopefully all of you reduce a little overwhelm is provide meals that take 30 minutes or less. And this gnocchi meal is killer. It's so good. But if you go over to moonandmagnolia.com, there is a section for dinners, and you'll see this recipe. You'll see a cheeseburger helper, sloppy joes, lemon chicken, a growing database of dinners that can all be made in under 30 minutes. And what I think is kind of funny about that is I also have this large database of sourdough recipes, which all take a really long time. And I think it's important to strike that balance, right? If you like to do things like long fermented sourdough and those sorts of creative endeavors, you probably don't have time to do that and a 2-hour dinner. So picking one to simplify can help you find the space to do the other things that might take a little bit longer. So here I'm just caramelizing onions in brown butter, and then I'm adding in some fresh garden sage, white wine, a little bit of Dijon mustard, heavy cream, and making a sauce. And then I'm cooking store-bought gnocchi in it. And this is so good. A few hacks for this: if you don't have fresh sage, you can use dried. You just add it in after the cream. I actually didn't have a lot of fresh sage, so I did a little bit of both. And then also, once you put the gnocchi into the sauce, if you feel like it's not thin enough to actually cook the gnocchi, just add about a 1/4 cup of water to it, and that will help cook it. It'll also reduce down, and the gnocchi will soak up that water, so you'll still have a nice, really thick, creamy sauce. And then I am shredding some Parmesan and Gruyere cheese and adding it once it is completely finished. And I had this ready to go on the table in 20 minutes, and that was with filming and moving my camera around. So it'll definitely be under 20 minutes for you. You can find this recipe and more over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. I'll leave that link in the description box below. Okay, next up is creamy lemon chicken, and this is made in one skillet in about 25 minutes. For this, you will need a half a cup of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of neutral oil, a pound of chicken, whether it's chicken thighs, thin-cut chicken breast, chicken tenders. Just make sure they're either sliced or pounded thinly. 2 to 3 cloves of garlic, 6 ounces of white wine, and a little hack for that is a split of wine is 6 ounces. So if you don't have a bottle or if you don't drink wine, you can just get a little split and that will do the job for you. 1 cup of heavy cream, 1 lemon zested and juice, a half cup of grated Parmesan, 5 ounces of baby spinach, and lemon slices for garnish if you're feeling fancy, but you of course don't have to have lemon slices, but either way, you are definitely fancy with or without the garnish. So I'm very simply just dredging these chicken thighs in some seasoned flour. And I've made a lot of fried chicken on YouTube lately. I don't know why, I guess I'm just in the fried chicken mood, but this is actually a pan-seared chicken, so it's not quite the same as what I have shared recently. So just dredge your chicken in flour and then preheat oil in a cast iron pan or a skillet. And you just need about 2 tablespoons for pan searing this. When the oil is hot, add your chicken to the skillet, and I let it cook for about, I'd say 4 to 5 minutes on the first side. In the past, I have felt like a lot of recipes really downplay how long it takes to pan fry or to sear something, but I think the real issue was me, user error over here. I think the real problem was that my skillet wasn't hot enough. So make sure your skillet's actually hot enough so you can really get a golden brown sear on each side within about 4 to 5 minutes. And then when you're ready on the first side, just flip them over and do the same. It took me about 10 minutes total to cook the chicken, and I'm using a digital thermometer just to make sure it hits 165. It is crucial that your chicken is cooked through at this stage because you really can't cook it anymore after this or you'll ruin the whole dish. Then take the chicken out and set it aside. Now, I would recommend first deglazing your pan with white wine and then adding in your garlic. I did the opposite and I burned my garlic. So deglaze your pan with some of the white wine. That will help cool the pan off a little bit, scrape off some of those brown bits for flavor, then saute your garlic, add in the rest of the wine, and add in the heavy cream. I've also made this before with half and half, and it turned out just fine and was delicious, but it's like really good with heavy cream. Then I'm just quickly zesting a lemon right over the skillet. So I really like to use this zester because you can just hold it right over your skillet or your bowl, whatever you're doing, and it gets the lemon zest right in there. And then I'm also adding in some shaved Parmesan. You could also use regular shredded Parmesan. And I'm stirring it up just until everything is combined. And now I'm juicing the same lemon that I zested, and I'm juicing the entire lemon. It seems like a lot of lemon juice, but with the cream and the Parmesan, it really balances out just fine. So do juice your whole lemon. Then I'm adding in the spinach, and this is really crucial. Put the spinach in, turn the heat off, and stir it just until that spinach starts to wilt. Overcooked spinach is pretty gnarly, so you really want to make sure it's not overcooked. Once that spinach starts to wilt and is soft, return your pan-fried chicken back into the skillet, and you don't even need to turn the heat back on because the residual heat will keep cooking that spinach and keep the sauce warm. And then I like to add in a few slices of lemon just to make it look really beautiful, and then sprinkle it with a little bit more Parmesan. But that's really optional. If you're in a huge hurry, there's no need to garnish it with any more lemon or Parmesan. This is great with broccoli or leftover rice or orzo or even a piece of toasted sourdough for a well-rounded meal. I really love the warm and hearty flavors of fall, and often we think about that in the context of baking, but there are so many delicious fall dinner recipes, and the one I want to share with you today is an early fall pizza. So I am simply roasting a butternut squash. And I should add this side note that I prepared a lot of the ingredients for this pizza throughout the day because I'm roasting a butternut squash and I'm making some caramelized onions that you'll see in a minute. But here I am peeling and I am cubing up this butternut squash so that way it roasts a little bit faster, but also when it's pre-cubed like that, you don't really have to worry about it when it comes time to put it on the pizza. And one little trick for getting the guts out of a squash like this is to use a grapefruit spoon. It can cut right underneath of the flesh a little bit and scoop it out in one swoop. I roasted the squash at 400 degrees for about 25 minutes or so, and I put them right on a hot baking stone, drizzled it with a little bit of olive oil, and added some salt and pepper. About halfway through, I took them out of the oven and just stirred them a little bit to make sure they were evenly cooked. And I let them cook until they were done, but maybe just slightly underdone because once they are on the pizza, they are going to cook again at 500 degrees. So I just want to make sure they didn't get mushy. And now I am caramelizing one onion. And just as a side note, caramelized onions are a great thing to make in advance and keep on hand because they're good on everything. So I prepared the squash and the onions earlier in the day, and now we are fast forwarding to dinner time, and I am making the base, which is a simple olive oil base. So this is olive oil with 1 clove of garlic from our garden, and then a little sprinkle of crushed red pepper. And I really wanted a flatbread pizza, but I did not feel like making flatbreads. I had some frozen sourdough pizza dough, so I shaped it into kind of like a giant flatbread and putting it on a hot stone. And now I am adding that olive oil base on top, cheese, butternut squash, caramelized onions, blue cheese, and a little bit of thyme. I also think this would be really good with either bacon. I have a homemade bacon recipe over my blog that you can check out, or if you have prosciutto on hand, you could put that on there and it would be so good. I baked this at 500 degrees for about 15 minutes and I turned it halfway through to make sure it was baked evenly. And then after slicing it, I drizzled it with a little bit of balsamic glaze. I did not think my husband would like the balsamic glaze on it. That's why I didn't put it on the whole pizza, but it turns out he loved it because this was delicious. I think anyone would love this pizza, and next time I'll just put the balsamic glaze right over the entire thing. But first up is a cheddar crusted pork chop and veggie sheet pan meal. For the veggie portion, I am just using up a few things that I have in the fridge and pantry, in particular Brussels sprouts and baby red potatoes. But the thing that I don't like about using Brussels sprouts and red potatoes is that they do require a little more prep than sometimes I have time for, especially during busy weeks like right before a holiday. So if time is of the essence for you, I recommend using something a little bit easier, like throwing some baby carrots on there, a bag of cauliflower, something like that. And now, of course, you can get as creative as you want with a sheet pan meal, but what I like to do is limit my sheet pan meals most of the time to an onion and 2 vegetables, sometimes even just 1 vegetable. So that way I am not stuck chopping up a bunch of things, because the whole point of a sheet pan meal is to keep it simple. So by featuring an onion and just 1 or 2 veggies, you have a variety of flavors, but it's just not too much work for chopping. For this recipe, I am going to bread some pork chops. You could use chicken breasts if that's what you want to. And I am making this cheddar crusted, which is delicious, by the way. So the first thing I'm doing is preparing the breading in a small dish. These are sourdough breadcrumbs that I think I actually made on YouTube not too long ago. I'll find that video and link it in the description box. And then I'm adding in some cheddar cheese, a little bit of freeze-dried onion powder. You could use regular onion powder, Italian seasoning, and salt and pepper. I have a 3-year-old also eating this, so I did not make them spicy, but I think this would be really good too with a little bit of cayenne pepper in it. Now, one thing I should note is that I know these are 1-dish meals, but sometimes there are more dishes needed to prepare them, which can seem a little off-putting if you really only want 1 dish to clean. So if that's the case, just slap some pork chops on that sheet pan and call it a day. But for me, what I like to think about with 1-dish meals isn't so much about if there are dishes needed to prepare. I don't want a lot of big dishes to put in the dishwasher, because that's what really starts to slow down my cleanup, is having like a big stock pot and a frying pan, a saucepan. That for me is what slows things down. So I don't really mind these smaller dishes for one dish meals because it's really easy cleanup still. So now I am just putting that pork chop, I'm dredging it in some egg and milk mixture and then right into that breading and cheddar cheese mixture. In terms of a breading, usually what you do is you dredge it through flour, dip it in egg, then put the breadcrumb mixture on. And in this case, I did not use the flour because I'm not frying them. These are going right in the oven, and that breading with the cheese, I think when the cheese melts, it actually just helps the breading stay on. It really did not need that flour mixture. So that reduces some of the dishes, and also it reduces an extra step. I am putting everything on a preheated baking stone. The oven was 425 degrees, and I have the veggies on one side and the pork chops on the other. And these go in for, I think I kept them in there for about 12, maybe 13 minutes or so. I took them out and flipped them over so they could crisp up on both sides. One thing to think about when you are pairing your protein and veggies for a sheet pan meal is to make sure that those veggies can withstand the temperature and time needed for the protein. Because if the protein isn't finished cooking yet and the veggies are overcooked, that's a bit of a problem, because now you have raw meat next to vegetables that are getting overcooked. So you just want to make sure that you have a hearty enough vegetable that can withstand that time. I let that cook for about another 10 minutes or so on the second side. And in total, this meal took about, I'd say 35 minutes to make, and it could be faster if you use vegetables that don't need to be chopped. This was so good. That crusty cheddar cheese is delicious. And if you happen to have leftovers, a really great way to crisp up breaded food like that is in the air fryer. So the next day for lunch, you can pop it in the air fryer and you have a delicious crusty breaded pork chop. Probably the thing that we think about the most as women and mothers, if that's who you are, is how to simplify dinner, especially Monday through Friday. So dinner is always a big question. What are we going to have? How am I going to make it? How long is it going to take? And one of my best pieces of advice, if you want my 2 cents, is to stick with something that you know works and that can work for lots of different things. And for me, that is breaded fried chicken or breaded fried food. And you can do any of this in the air fryer too. So if fried food isn't your thing, no problem, just use the air fryer. Today, I am making a breaded fried sourdough chicken. And I actually made this in my air fryer maybe like a month or 2 ago on YouTube. So I'll leave that in the description box below and you can check it out. But in this case, I am seasoning flour, freeze-dried eggs. I have 1 egg of freeze-dried eggs in here. If you don't have freeze-dried eggs, just use 1 regular egg. And sourdough breadcrumbs. I showed how to make sourdough breadcrumbs on my blog and on YouTube. I'll leave links for that in the description box below. And that's just salt and pepper I'm seasoning it with. And then I am putting some neutral oil in my cast iron pan and heating it up to about 375. So to make sure that the oil is the right temperature, I like to use an electric thermometer. Any tool that removes guesswork is a useful way to simplify. I use this recipe for chicken breasts, chicken thighs, chicken tenders, fried green tomatoes, onion rings, you name it, I use it. So I don't even have to think about this. So all I do is I dredge the chicken, in this case it's chicken thighs, in some flour that's seasoned with salt and pepper, then shake off the excess flour. Then I dip it in egg to coat it in the egg. That egg is also seasoned with salt and pepper. I try to let the excess egg drip off, but sometimes that's a little bit tricky because it gets stuck to the flour, which is actually kind of the goal. And then I put the chicken into the breadcrumbs. So for this, I like to kind of mush the chicken down into the breadcrumbs and even pat some of the breadcrumbs on to help them adhere. I have this recipe for sourdough fried chicken on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. You can check that out in the description box below. But you just get the breadcrumbs on there, pat them on, and then I just stick it on a plate while I do the other pieces of chicken. It's totally fine for it. In fact, I think they fry better when they rest a little bit anyway. I know for some of you watching, fried chicken A may not be your thing, or B, if you haven't made it a lot, it seems really complicated. But I'm sure you have something in your recipe and cooking repertoire that you know like the back of your hand that you can make today that's really simple with ingredients that you have in your house. You do not have to reinvent the wheel every single time you make something. You don't have to make a new recipe every single night for dinner. You don't have to make something new every single time you cook. You can double up on recipes and then have that for a couple of days. You can lean on what you know and use that and keep things really simple and within your skill set. There's a time and a place for learning new recipes, but Monday through Friday, usually for me, isn't it. Now, here's the deal with frying chicken. It has to be 350 degrees to fry. If it's not, it'll be soggy. So let your oil get up to about 375, even maybe 385. So when you put the chicken in, the temperature drops, right? Because the chicken's cold, but that way it'll drop to 350. So you're frying at 350, even though you let it get all the way up to 375. You really don't want it to be below 350 because your chicken will get soggy, and that's like kind of nasty. No one wants soggy fried chicken. So you can see here, my temperature is dropping after I put the chicken in. And if you need to adjust the temperature to bring the temperature up or down as needed. I let these cook for about, I'd say like 5 minutes on each side. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure. I kind of peek under and look to see if it's browning, and then I carefully use tongs and flip them over. Before I learned how to fry food, I'm actually from Western Maryland, but I've lived in the South for about 20 years. So there is a little period of my life where I didn't know how to fry food, but I do now. And I have learned that when you are putting food in hot oil or flipping it, a little trick is to just keep it close to the oil. You never want to put the food in from up high because it could splash and burn you. So just make sure you are keeping the food low to the oil and turning it and making sure your chicken is done at 165. And this stuff was delicious. I tend to shy away from salads because I feel like you have to chop 500 things just to get one little bowl of salad. But if you already have everything ready to go, a salad is actually a really easy way to make dinner, and it's pretty healthy too. I like to think about scaffolding what I'm doing in the kitchen. So I made all of these parts throughout the day for a salad. And then also all of these things can be used for other meals. So I'm kind of building on what I already have. And that helps me simplify my meals throughout the week, making a few things that can be used in multiple ways. Now, I did most of this in one day in the margins of my day. And when I had little pockets of time, that worked for me on this particular day. But sometimes I do stuff on Monday, and then on Tuesday, I'll do a little more. And on Wednesday, I'll do something else. And then I combine all that stuff on Thursday for a meal. So do what works for you. Truly try to keep it simple. Thank you so much for stopping by today. And if you've made it this far in the video, thank you. That is one of the best ways you can support my growing YouTube channel. If you found this helpful, be sure to check out the other videos that I have listed here because they are full of recipes that my family loves, and I know that your family will love too. I hope you're off to a wonderful new year. Again, thank you so much for stopping by today, and I will see you again next time.